Hi everyone, welcome to the community classroom. This is Dr. Tracey McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator, and we're going to turn our attention to South Carolina and the Jacobites of South Carolina. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to be looking at the passenger list for those on the convict ships that were shipped out of Liverpool bound for America, specifically Charleston, South Carolina. Now, there are many immigrant passenger lists that you can check. Some are online. There are many, however, that are in the library, and you really need to go to a large library so that you can get access to some significant reference materials. And because they are usually they're in the reference area, you won't be able to check them out, but you'll be able to make copies of them in the library. The other place you want to check are actual state registers, because the states actually have registrations for those who immigrated out of Europe and immigrated into the Americas. And so for each jurisdiction, you should be able to find registrations for those who immigrated. Now, this will be slightly difficult for those of you who are in areas that were Louisiana territory, and particularly the state of Louisiana, because all of those old registers are generally in French, and so that might present a difficulty, and that includes even the land records. And so we're getting ready to bring this much closer to home, and that means for now South Carolina. We will also be looking at Virginia and Maryland. As always, if this video appears on anything other than Dr. Tracey McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. Let's get started. The first ship we have shipping out of Liverpool on May the 7th of 1716. And that ship carrying prisoners out of Europe was bound for South Carolina. We have also looked at records before for Bristol, but we will look at some of those records again. Okay, we're going to start off with the ship Susanna, and this again is coming out of Liverpool, May 7th, 1716, going into South Carolina. Now this is the registry for that, so you can see the list of names. You'll be able to see them a little bit more clearly in just a second. But what you can do is, if you are tracing your ancestors and you trace back and you find any of these surnames in terms of your ancestors or variations of those surnames, then this would mean you might want to look a little deeper at this particular listing and the history of these individuals. And the registry for this particular boat continues, so you can see that this list gets a little lengthy. And the list continues, and you can see names again, such as Stewart, you see Campbell, you see Guild, you see Robb, you see Davidson. And the list continues, and what you can also see, remember, is the name of the captains of the ship. And in this particular instance, you also have the owner of the ship. And so you can see the list a little bit more clearly here, going into Charleston, South Carolina in the 1700s. If you have gotten stuck in the 1700s, this may be a place that you might want to look, and you might want to look at these lists to see if you see anything that looks substantially similar to your ancestor's name. Now remember, the names will sometimes have variations in terms of spellings, and so you want to be on the lookout for that. So you might have a Smith, but you might have it with an E or without an E, or with a Y or with an I. So again, be on the lookout for that. Also things like Robertson and Robinson, and also Stewart with an EW and a UA. And so you want to be on the lookout for things like that, just sort of taking out vowels or exchanging vowels. That's pretty common. And so you can see here on this list, if you have ancestors that were either coming out of South Carolina or you're in South Carolina, this would be a list that you would definitely want to be looking at. And so you can see names on this list starting way up at the B's, and you've got Baton, you've got Bruce, Cameron, you have Clark, you have Davidson, you have Fraser, you have Grant, you have Hammond, you have Johnston, you have McCoy, McCullum, McDonald, McIntosh, McLaurin, McNaughton, McPherson, McVeigh, Robertson, Robinson, Shaw, Ross, Smith, Simpson, and of course you have the Stewarts. Now we're moving on to the next ship going into South Carolina, coming out of Liverpool, and it is in April of 1716, and this is the Wakefield. And here we have the ship Wakefield, and we have it going into South Carolina, April 1716. Now, of course, this is when the ship is registering these particular rebel prisoners. And you can see the list of names. So you see everything from McQueen to Smith over here, and you're going to be, of course, able to see this a little bit more clearly in just a second. One important thing to note about South Carolina is that South Carolina was the major destination for the transatlantic slave trade. South Carolina is also a major location of American Indians, and so you had a lot of mixing going on in South Carolina. And the list continues on here, and you can see names from Shaw to McDonald. And this list continues on, and you can see everything from McIntosh to Cunningham to Henderson. And here you see additional individuals from McHenry to Sinclair to Stewart, of course. And the list continues on, and again you will notice the names of those individuals at the bottom. Those are very important names. They were heavily involved in not only this convict transportation dynamic, but the transatlantic slave trade. And here we have the names Bagby and Bain and McBain and Barnett and Berry and Burbank and Burns. You can also see the names of the prisons that they came out of, and you can also check with the UK for these prison records to get information about specific prisoners. And here you see James Clark and Thomas Clark and David Croft and Crafts. You see George Cunningham, you see Dunlop, you see Ferguson, you see Flint, Fraser, Guthrie, Henderson, and Kennedy. Now you want to be on the lookout for multiple family member names in this particular situation, because they were actually uprooting entire families in this situation and deporting them. And so you have a Philip Lyon, again another McBean name. You have McLeod, you have McCoy, McKee, McDonald. And there was apparently a large family of the McGillivray family. So you see John and Loa and McLaughlin and Owen and William. And then you have the McIntosh family of Don, Alex, Alexander, Duncan, John. One thing you want to keep in mind is that when you see these shared surnames, these are what are known as clans. And so you have the McIntosh, the McKenzie, McLeans, McPherson, McQueen again. And additional names here, so you see more McQueens, you see John, you see Alex, Alexander, you also see George Mitchell, you see Miles Moore, and Moore spelled in a variety of ways there. You see Nicholson, and you see Rankin and Rankel. And here you see some interesting variations. You see James Ray or Rash, you see Richardson, you see Charlie Ross, you see Alexander Shaw, John Shaw, you see Sinclair, and a variation for Patrick Sinclair as St. Clair. You see Don Smith, you see Andrew Songster and Sangster, you see Donald Stewart and Steward. You also see James Wilkie. And you see Strahan and Stranathan, so those are variations for the same name. You see James Wilkie again. You see also Wilson and Wilshon. And then you see Robert Young. And remember, when you see all of these names, such as the prison names, again, these are records that you can also check in terms of those locations. You can also check these municipality names and see if there are records there. Because these would be in English, it will be easier to access these in terms of looking for names. Now, again, if you're looking in France or Spain, you're going to have a little bit more of a problem. Again, if you are able to make it to a major library that has vast holdings in terms of reference materials, you will be able to find a number of immigration and passenger lists. Now, of course, many people haven't been looking for immigration and passenger lists because they've been expecting to find their ancestors either in the Americas and having never been anywhere else, or they are expecting not to see their ancestors because they understand them to have come on slave ships. But now you see that there are some other avenues that your ancestors may have taken in terms of getting to the Americas. And so you want to check out all of those resources. And so if you see a surname, you see multiple surnames for your ancestors, there are a number of roads that you can go down in order to figure out their origins and their stories. And since this is all about the Stuarts, it sometimes helps to see the faces of the individuals who are related to these Jacobite uprisings. For those of you who have traced your ancestors back to South Carolina, hopefully this information was helpful for you. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.